Last episode we talked about the Morgul Blade and the healing plant called Athelas. Strider left the wounded Frodo and his friends and searched the area for this plant, also known as Kingsfoil. When he, after several hours, returned in the early morning and found the Morgul Blade besides Frodo, he of course knew that the healing power of Kingsfoil would not be sufficient and decided to leave Weathertop as soon as possible, because the Ringwraiths would return at some point, and so they started a difficult journey to Rivendell. Of this journey, only few elements made it into the film, and this will be our main topic for today. The flight to the fort and also trolls. As always, I try to pronounce names as Tolkien described it. Spoiler warning and shoutouts to Niati and Kimberly80 for allowing me to use the amazing artworks. The wounded Frodo could of course not walk for hours every day over the course of 2 weeks. As a result, the group split what Bill the Pony had to carry among them so Frodo could ride. The power of Athelas is also described in this passage of the book, but there Strider put the leaves into the boiled water and the hobbits washed Frodo's wound with it, while in the film he makes a paste out of it with his mouth and puts it on the wound. In the book, the fragrance of the steam was also described as refreshing for the other hobbits too. I love this detail as it makes this scene and even the scent very imaginable. As mentioned, Strider had to leave them at night to find Athelas. As explained last episode, the mighty Dún-Edain of Númenor brought it from their island to Middle-earth, and it could be found around their settlements. As we have learned, Isildur's father Elendil built Weathertop, and he and his sons were born in Númenor, even though they were in exile, and Weathertop was built after Númenor was destroyed. It's possible that they brought this powerful healing plant with them, or cultivated it close to their settlements and watchtowers, and of course it can be found around Amon-Sul because of that. The people of Arnor later had to fight against the Nazgul, and having Athelas around was for sure useful. What is interesting in this context, the flora of Númenor was enriched by Yavanna, basically the Vala or High Angel of Nature. Many plants were also brought there from Aman, especially from Tol Eressëa, as explained in the Silmarillion. This could explain the healing power of Kingsfoil. However, there seems to be a note in the History of Middle-earth's book The Lays of Beleriand, where Athelas already appeared in the story of Beren and Luthien, and is brought to the wounded Beren by the great hound Huan. How canon that is can be debated. This would however indicate that it was present in Middle-earth even before Númenor, and maybe just more widely spread by the Númenorians again in the Second Age. It could also be that Athelas grew only in Beleriand, which was destroyed and sunk into the ocean after the War of Wrath at the end of the First Age, and with this it could have vanished from Middle-earth until it was brought back from Númenor. A possible explanation. However, I like how this plant is connected to Númenor and even Aman and the High Angels. Huan himself was also a great hound from Aman, one of the hunting dogs of Orome, huntsmen of the Valar. This gives this plant something divine and mystical. But back to the Lord of the Rings. Strider had to journey for hours to get some Kingsfoil leaves. We partially find this referenced in the film too. There he also asks Sam if he knows the plant to help him search for it. He realizes that Sam as a gardener could know it. However, in the book he goes alone, and Athelas is also a secret of the Dún-Edain Rangers of the North, and especially their chieftains, who are descendants of the Númenorian kings. So a little liberty the film takes here for the sake of pacing. As explained last episode, having someone heavily wounded usually dictates a fast pace in film, and they leave Weathertop instantly, and we are relatively fast in Rivendell as a result. In the book, however, Frodo has to live with this wound for quite some time, over 2 weeks. When Aragorn carries Frodo around in the film through the forest, Frodo shouts Gandalf, and the film cuts to Isengard, where Gandalf is imprisoned on top of Orthanc, and he sent this moth to get help. We already talked about that in detail in several previous episodes, and I skip it here. Interestingly, I never thought that this cut to Isengard was distracting. From one grim situation to another, but the moth indicated hope and change. When the film cuts back to the hobbits, we see that Strider finds Athelas, but is surprised by a blade. Here we meet Arwen the first time. This is basically a parallel to the Isengard scene. It starts grim, but things start to move and there's hope. Isengard is also a very interesting place. The viewer wants to most likely know more about too, so switching between these two locations works very well from my perspective. In the book it is not Arwen, and the character appearing here is a powerful elf lord named Glorfindel. I think he has some cameos in the film too, but that's it. I will dedicate a complete episode to him next time, but let us look at some other details first. Before Strider searched for Athelas in the film, the hobbits camp at the 3 Petrified Trolls. We see some dialogues that are also inspired by the book, for example when Strider talks to Sam in private. The dialogue is often different, but some snippets and the tone seem very similar to what we find in the book. Finding the Petrified Trolls happened in the book too, and if you have read The Hobbit or seen the first Hobbit film, you of course recognize them. They are the trolls from Bilbo's legendary adventure with a dwarf, William Huggins, called Bill, Tom and Bert. Interestingly, Tolkien wrote in letter 153, which he however never sent, and so canon can be debated, that he saw it retrospectively as a mistake to humanize the trolls so much in the Hobbit book, and that he should not have called, for example, one William or Bill, but in his later revisions of the book he kept the names anyway. I guess it's part of the fairy tale character of the Hobbit. I also read an interesting article discussing if the names could be referencing William Shakespeare, Thomas Nash and Robert Greene. I link it in the description. There seem to be some parallels to their works, and Professor Tolkien mentioned them and some of their ideas in letters or, for example, his lectures too. I really like the idea of the hobbits from The Lord of the Rings finding the Petrified Trolls. It's a magical moment and one of demystification. To this point, when Bilbo told his story in the Shire, it was just a fairy tale told by an old hobbit. You had to believe him, or not. But when Frodo, Sam, Merry, Pippin, Bill the Pony and Strider saw them with their own eyes, it was not a fairy tale or a myth anymore. It became reality, or history inside the universe of the book, at least this small part of the story. The story these hobbits were told as kids turned out to be actually true. Bilbo was not making it up. The hobbits and Strider also explored the area and the troll cave, and it was as Bilbo described it. There are of course more details from that story that are true, like Gandalf wielding his sword Glamdring. We will revisit this when we look into the Hobbit films at some point in the far future. Of course, there were also parts of Bilbo's stories that were not true. We talked about the 2 different editions of the Hobbit book and how Tolkien implemented the differences of the chapter Riddles in the Dark by making Bilbo slightly altering the story and claiming the One Ring was a prize that he fairly won in a competition with Gollum, when in truth the ring was actually not part of the prize for winning the game. Gollum would not have betted. However, reaching the Petrified Trolls in the Troll Shores took quite some time in the book, and it was a painful time for Frodo, being outside day and night in cold and rain in the autumn season. Frodo was also sad seeing his friends carrying all the supplies so he could ride on Bill. He got wounded 6th of October on Weathertop and crossed the bridge over the river Horwell, called Mithaithel in Sindarin, both names mean something like Grey Spring, at 13th of October, so a week later. The Troll Shores with the Petrified Trolls lay beyond that bridge. In this whole week from Weathertop to the bridge before the Troll Shores, they avoided the road as much as possible, but ultimately had to return to the road to cross the bridge and get to the other side of the river. To finally reach Rivendell, they had to cross another river, the Loudwater or Bruinen. Strider feared that the enemy was waiting there for them, so he scouted the first bridge alone and found a single pale green jewel, a barrel, an elf stone on it, but there was no sign of the enemy. This made it somewhat clear that the enemy could be waiting for them somewhere in the land beyond. However, Strider saw it as a good omen, finding the elf stone on the bridge, and so they crossed it fast. Now the land changed. This new country seemed threatening and unfriendly. An interesting note in the book, because east of Weathertop was once the land of LotR, which literally translates to Evil Forest or also Trollshaw, that allied with Angmar, and after crossing the bridge and traveling further into the land, this became apparent, probably because the east road was the border between Cardolan and LotR, who fought against each other, while beyond the Horwell we are deep in LotR, which later effectively became a part of Angmar. When I first saw the films and first heard the name Witch King of Angmar, I always asked myself, what or where's Angmar? Well, it was, you could say, here, at least at some point, where the Petrified Trolls were, even though LotR and Angmar are long gone. When The Lord of the Rings takes place, we still find hints in the books about leftovers. The hobbits saw ancient ruins of stone walls and towers on the hills of that area. Frodo recognized them from Bilbo's tales and wondered if they would pass the Petrified Trolls. He asked Strider who built those towers and if this was a troll country. But Strider explains that trolls do not build and that no one lives here anymore. He also explains that men once dwelt here, but they allied with the evil forces of Angmar. The people of this land were indeed once Dún Edain, and it was part of Arnor, the kingdom founded by Elendil. But the Dún Edain bloodline failed here, and Hillmen took over the rule after Arnor split into 3 kingdoms. But the Hillmen were secretly allied with Angmar, and so the downfall of LotR was initiated. It must be considered that Angmar was the realm of the Witch King, and with this a realm of Sauron, a supernatural evil force that threatened all of Middle-earth and the Free People. I like how it becomes noticeable that the hobbits crossed a land that belonged once to the enemy. This detail maybe also further explains why the Nazgul did not attack earlier, because this was once the realm of their leader. It's almost iconic that they chose this land as battleground for the One Ring, and we must consider that Weathertop, of course, was also at the exact point where LotR touched the other 2 remaining kingdoms of the Dún Edain in the north. Like different forces of fate with a foundation in ancient lore were each pulling at the One Ring here. Aragorn, a descendant of the kings of Arthedain, while the hobbits were wielding weapons of Cardolan against the Witch King of Angmar, who controlled LotR. Tolkien masterfully connects lore, or the history of his world, geography, and his story of his book with each other here. It's also iconic that the Witch King returned to this land. Following that, Frodo asked Strider how he knows such tales of this empty land, and Strider answered, "The heirs of Elendil do not forget all things past." I think in this lies a key for Aragorn's success and a valuable lesson. We should not forget our past and also our mistakes from the past and learn from them. The further journey also became difficult in this land. They avoided the road, but it was rainy and the wind blew, which caused Frodo a lot of pain and his arm was lifeless. For a time, Frodo even had to walk through an area where it was too difficult to ride. In one night, they were not able to make a fire because the wood was wet. Even though Frodo's wound was slowly closing, he was in pain and had bad dreams at night. In addition, their provisions were running low after they were nearly 10 days out from Weathertop. This long torment and hopelessness is a bit lost in the films for obvious reasons. The enemy hoped for Frodo to turn into a race. All they needed to do was delaying them long enough, but they underestimated Frodo's toughness, even though it was not looking good for him. At one point he collapsed and lay on the ground shivering. In the film we see a bit of that too. I like how Frodo makes noises that slowly become somewhat similar to the cries of the ringwraiths when he is laying on the ground close to the Petrified Trolls. As mentioned, Strider and the hobbits avoided the road, but went too far north and had to slowly go back south again, which also resulted in Frodo feeling better and the mood was rising. We can read that his wound was closed and Sam asked Strider in private why his friend was still not well, even though the wound has healed. Strider explained that there was some kind of poison or magic still at work. It was also here where they found an old path, and in my opinion a funny little passage begins in the books to lighten the mood further. I fully recommend reading it. First, they found an old abandoned troll cave. Pippin and Merry went ahead and came back saying that they have seen trolls at the middle of the day. Frodo said nothing, and Strider picked up a stick and came with them. He, however, walked carelessly up to the troll and hit it with a stick, saying, "Get up, old stone." Nothing happened, to the amazement of the hobbits, and Frodo laughed. Frodo explained that they forgot their family history and that these were the stone trolls from Bilbo's story. Frodo seemed to believe Bilbo. For him it was history, but for example, Pippin never fully believed it. We discussed the demystification earlier in the video. Strider explained that it was broad daylight with a bright sun, so no trolls could have been found outside anyway. He also commented on an old bird's nest behind one of the troll's ears. It's well written. I could imagine "Get up, old stone" is also a reference, maybe to Robert Greene. Another possible detail: Aragorn's grandfather Arador was captured and slain by hill trolls north of Rivendell. It is possible that these three trolls are related to Arador's death, because in the Hobbit book we find the hint in a dialogue between the trolls that they came down from the mountains in the chapter Roast Mutton. There are some arguments against it too, like that they could be a different kind of troll breed. However, that Strider hit them with a stick that also breaks in the process, and the talk about forgetting family history makes this an interesting detail. This is also the first time in the book that our heroes met creatures of the Dark Lords, not counting the ringwraiths. But why do trolls, except for the Olokai, which were a special breed, turn into stone when they are exposed to sunlight? The origin story of the Orcs is a very difficult topic, as we learned in a past video, somewhat similar to the origin story of the trolls. According to the Lord of the Rings, the first Dark Lord transformed and twisted elves into orcs, and orcs became a mockery of the elves. In later writings, Tolkien changed his mind on this. Trolls were interestingly a mockery of Ents, quote, "But trolls are only counterfeits made by the enemy in the great darkness in mockery of Ents, as orcs were of elves." While Ents as living trees probably needed sunlight, trolls were in that regard inverted. As we learned in one of the last episodes, sun and moon were connected to the two trees of Valinor. Their light opposes the dark powers in the world and, for example, uncovered and weakened the Nazgul, so it makes sense that sunlight also had a great effect on the trolls. Trolls were, of course, formed by the first Dark Lord and Sauron's master Morgoth. Their exact origin is not known, but there is the hint that Morgoth took primitive human types. We find that phrase in the History of Middle-earth book Morgoth's Ring, and transformed them into trolls as mockery of Ents. The origin of the Ents we will discuss in a much later episode, but they are connected to the Vala Yavanna again and placed as the protectors of plants and forests. What primitive human types mean is really hard to say though. Maybe some form of primates or actually men. Some trolls survived the First Age and later joined Sauron and settled in some places. Somehow the troll shores had to get their name. In The Lord of the Rings, trolls that are not Olokai are more like primitive beasts, while the three from The Hobbit are more humanized. We mentioned letter 153 and Tolkien seeing this as a mistake at the beginning of the video, but of course the trolls from The Lord of the Rings serve a different purpose in the narrative than the trolls from The Hobbit. There are different breeds of trolls: mountain trolls, hill trolls, cave trolls, stone trolls, Uruk-hai, and maybe there are snow trolls too. The famous king of Rohan, Helm Hammerhand, is compared to one. They were as ants around 12 feet high, so over 3.6 meters. I read the theory that the 3 trolls from The Hobbit might have been stone trolls, which are to my knowledge only mentioned in a poem where they can speak Westron too. Aragorn's grandfather was killed by hill trolls. I however doubt that there were such specific classifications known for trolls among the peoples of Middle-earth that were also standardized, and instead we are here in a territory where myth and reality overlap. Seeing the trolls and remembering Bilbo's stories followed by a bit of singing by Sam definitely lifted the mood and revived the mind of Frodo. The power of stories and song, but after they continued their journey for a bit, they heard the sound of hooves again, bringing back fear into their hearts. What this means, we will find out next episode. Thank you for watching. I'm actually surprised how long this episode got. I looked quite deep into some of the details, and trolls and ents will play a role in the future again. There is one detail at the troll cave we will also cover next episode, and then I think we will talk a lot about Glorfindel as mentioned, and with this hopefully reach Rivendell in episode 20. As always, if you liked this episode, feel free to press the like button, leave a comment, maybe check my other videos, playlists are in the description, and recommend me further. In case you want to subscribe, consider pressing the stupid bell. Beyond that, maybe follow me on Twitter. I have also a Discord server and stream games on Twitch. Currently a Dark Souls 1 randomizer run where enemies and items are switched around or replaced very randomly. Next video will be either the next episode or my Final Fantasy VII Remake critique. Still not sure if I really want to make the critique video though. However, more Tolkien related lore videos are definitely coming. Again, thank you for watching, stay safe and healthy in these difficult times, and goodbye.